There's a lot of really cool armor in the Halo universe, but the problem is, it's stuck in a video game. Or at least, until now. Hi there, and welcome to NateTep's Ultimate Spartan Making Tutorial. In this video, I'm going to show you how I made this suit of Mjolnir Mk from Halo Infinite. Now, this entire suit was made either by handcrafting the armor out of foam, like this, or, in the case of the helmet, finishing a 3D print like this. Now, this entire suit was made entirely for my purposes, from the homemade vacuum-formed visor, to the leather details on the tech suit, to each piece being individually scaled to fit my lengthy proportions. This entire project went from idea to reality in about 4 months over the summer of 2023, while working full-time, mind you, and I think this is one of the most complex suits I've ever made. And so, if you're interested to see how I made this suit, or especially if you're interested in making something like this yourself, please enjoy the video. Okay, so all of the foam pieces are basically made in the same way, so I'm going to go ahead and show you how to make one of the pieces, and then you'll know that all of the others are made in the same way. And the one I'm going to show you how to do is the thigh piece, because that's just the one I feel like doing right now. Okay, so the first step is go to the 405th, then go to the Armory, Halo Infinite, UNSC, and there's the Mark 7 right there. And if you remember, you'll be able to download this. From there, you're going to want to go ahead and open them up in Armour Smith and start scaling them. I don't know if the scale of all of these pieces is going to stay the same, but I do know that the thigh and the shin are pretty much going to stay the same, so I'm going to go ahead and proceed with that. So the way you scale it is you put it on, and then you right-click, hit scale, and then shrink fit, and then it'll scale it down for you until it fits. And this one here scaled this piece to 98.2%, and I can see that the bottom is 199 millimeters. And I go ahead and open that up in Pepakura. The reason I do this in Pepakura is because Armour Smith doesn't let you add numbers, and also sometimes the patterns get a little wonky. Anyways, open it up in Pepakura, go to 2D menu, change scale, set scale, and then I knew that 203 is 199 according to Armour Smith. Slap that, and then I go ahead and use this text tool, and I'm going to go ahead and add some numbers, so that way I know which piece is which. So now I've got my template all ready, and I can go ahead and print it out. Great, so now I've got my templates all printed out here, and now the next step is to go ahead and cut all of these out. Okay, so now that I have all of these pieces cut out, I'm going to go ahead and trace them onto this 1/2" EVA foam. Okay, so as you can see, I have all of the template pieces traced out onto the foam, and I could go ahead and start cutting them out. I've got 2 knives here, depending on what size piece I'm cutting out, and I've also got the file open on my computer, so that way I can see if I have to cut any of these pieces on an angle, so I can put them together a little nicer. It's important to see how all of these pieces are going to go together on the computer, so that way I cut them all out properly. Alrighty, so as you can tell, I have all of my pieces cut out. Some of them have bevels, some of them are just straight edges, but something you might be able to see is that a lot of these pieces, especially around the curves, are cut really roughly, and you know, like sometimes it's just hard to get a nice cut when it goes around the curve. So what I like to do at this point in time is I take all these up and I go over them with the Dremel tool just to clean up any kind of rough cuts, so that way they can glue together a little nicer. Alright, so I've got this Dremel tool here, and so I have a little more mobility. I have this snake on it. For most of the work, I'm going to be using this larger sanding bit, and then for some of the finer stuff, I also have these smaller ones. I've got lots of extras of these. You could just buy a whole bunch of them on Amazon. So yeah, all I'm going to do is kind of clean up any of these rough cuts, especially these ones on the inside here, just so they're easier to glue together and so they look nice. So these 2 pieces here I kind of didn't do such a great job on, so I'm going to have to redo those. I might actually 3D print them because I think getting in here with the sander is a little bit tricky. As for the rest of these pieces, I've got this heat gun here, and what I'm going to do is heat them all up just a little bit, and that'll kind of melt down the outer layer of foam and create this shell, and it kind of seals it in. I do this before I glue because if I heat it up after I glue, sometimes the seams like to open up. This way I don't have to worry about that. While I've got this heat gun out, it's also a good time to bend some of the pieces into their shape. And just like that, now I have a bunch of really nice foam pieces that have no sharp edges. And you'll notice that the pieces that I had trouble sanding because they had this really sharp inner curve now have this dandy little 3D printed wall in there, so that way I have some cleaner edges. And I'm going to fill in the gap between the plastic and the foam later. With that out of the way, I am ready to glue all of these pieces together. My glue of choice is contact cement. I've got a little bit in this bottle over here as well. So what I'm going to do is put a thin bead on the edge of the pieces that I want to glue together, and then I'm going to smooth it out with this scrap piece of foam, so that way I have a nice even and thin layer. Then, once it's dry to the touch, not tacky, it has to be dry, I'll go ahead and stick the pieces together. I'm going to try and do a couple pieces at a time, so I'm not waiting 5 minutes for the glue to dry every time. Also note, contact cement is very much not good for you to breathe in, so I have an organic vapor respirator over here, and I also have both of the windows in this room open with fans blowing air. With that out of the way, let's get to gluing. Okay, so we pretty much have this entire piece done. I just have to do a couple of details. So I've cut a few shapes out of some smaller foam here, and I'm just going to go ahead and glue those on now. There we go. There was a little bit of a gap here, so I just filled that in with a triangle. There we go. As you can see, I have all of the lovely details added to this piece. There's still a couple of steps I have to do, but I'm going to do that all at the end so I could do all the pieces at the same time. So now I'm going to go ahead and make the rest of these pieces. Okay, look at this. I think this has got to be the most complex foam armor piece I've ever made. It is 4 full foam mats. This is for the torso piece. It's already taken me hours and hours just to get the template cut out and traced onto the foam, and now I have to cut it out. This is going to be really complicated. Now before I show you all of the completed foam pieces, I want to show you how to make one last piece. One of the things I really wanted to get right about this suit is the undersuit, or the tech suit, especially the section between the torso and the waist piece. Now, on the chief suit that I made a few years ago, I just left this area empty in hopes that wearing black underneath would look the part well enough. And while that's not the worst solution in the world, I feel like this is one of the things I can improve on the most. You'll hear me refer to this section as the ab wrap, and it's a pretty complex piece, a little more complex than you might think. Now, past Nathan didn't do a very good job explaining how the ab wrap section was made, so I'm gonna have to do it in retrospect. Basically, my goal for the ab wrap was to make a section of the undersuit that would sit between the torso and the waist piece. This is the part of the suit where the undersuit is most visible. So if you're not making an entire undersuit, which I'm not, just making this one little piece will do $1 million worth of good. The process for making this section is very similar to making the rest of the foam pieces. It started with a template that I got from the 405th, which I then printed out, cut out and traced onto 4mm EVA foam this time. Then I cut out the foam and glued certain sections together, and this is where I start to do things a little bit differently. On the ab wrap, you'll notice that there are very distinct sections of what appears to be some sort of leather. And these sections look like they're stitched together. So that's exactly what I tried to do with my ab wrap. I glued some of the foam pieces together to make up the larger sections of the ab wrap. Then, for each of those sections, I cut out a piece of black faux leather and used contact cement to stick it to the foam. Next, I join all of those larger sections together by hand sewing them through the back side. Originally, I tried to use glue to stick the larger sections together, but I found that if you put any sort of tension on the ab wrap, you would be able to see the glue on the inside of the seam. This is why I found that sewing was the best way to join the pieces. Now, the spine section of the ab wrap was much too complex to make using this method. It was even pretty complex to make out of 4mm EVA foam following the template, so instead I had to make the spine out of 12mm EVA foam from scratch. These pieces weren't covered in faux leather, they were just sprayed with Plasti-Dip and painted black. The spine section was then glued to the ab wrap with E6000. The ab wrap can open up all the way so I could put it on. It's held together with Velcro, and the opening is along a seam near the back. Now that I've gotten the ab wrap finished, as well as the mostly finalized shapes of all of the foam armor pieces, I could start working on how I'm going to rig all of the armor. My go-to strategy is using lots of non-flexible and flexible 3/4 inch strapping and parachute clips to secure the armor. I try my best to put the straps in inconspicuous areas so they don't take away from the look of the armor, with the exception being the thigh pieces where they connect to the waist section, as the straps are actually visible in the game in that area. As for the rest of the pieces, I usually just hot glue straps right to the foam in such a way that I can still reach them while wearing the armor. The rigging for the suit is actually quite simple, besides the rigging for the thigh pieces. The shoulders connect directly to the torso piece with one strap, the torso piece opens like a clamshell and is secured closed with Velcro. Okay, so as you can see, I've made this kind of harness thing so I can mount a couple of the pieces, mainly the thigh pieces, because I find those are the ones that tend to slip down or turn around on you the most. So what I've come up with here is this belt, and that just clips on right over here at the side, these little parachute clips, along with this pair of suspenders to help support it a little bit. This piece here is elastic, so that way these straps don't slip down on me. I've got these two straps at the front on an angle. That's how it is in the game, so I'm trying to stay true to that. And then on the back I have 6 clips. It looks a little bit messy. I'm going to try and organize those in a second, but there's 3 straps that go to each thigh piece, which adds up to 6 clips total. Alrighty, so I went ahead and put most of the suit on. As you saw before, these shoulder straps here just have a little bit of a clip that goes into the torso section there. The forearms are just sitting there at the moment. I think that'll be fine. I don't think I need to do anything special there. Now, the thing I just showed you is the thighs. So as you can see, I have a strap kind of going on an angle to each thigh, and then around the back, there are 3 straps that go to each one, and that's just how it goes with the game. And to cover up all of those straps, I have the cod piece here, so let me just go ahead and cover all that up. Excellent, so that looks pretty good. You go around the back. So the main goal here is you want to be able to see the straps because those are actually decorative, but you don't want to be able to see any of the clips. So I think we're doing pretty good on that front. Proportions are pretty good. I have to figure out a better way to mount the actual torso section at the moment because it can kind of roll back on me. But other than that, I'm really happy with the amount of movement I have in this thing. Like I can go a full, I have full range of movement in my arms. I can still get down on one knee. That's all you need, really. I added a strap in between the torso and the abdomen piece. So now, if this moves, it just kind of springs right back into position. That's quite nice. I added a little bit of Velcro under the cod piece underneath that part and this part. So now when I move around, the cod piece and the abdomen piece kind of move together. What else? I still have to fix the gap between the shins and the shoes, and I'm debating making these thighs a little bit bigger because I'm looking at them. They might be a tad small, or I might just have to run them a little bit lower. Honestly, that looks okay. Like I think I could live with that. We're still working on that. Obviously, I'm not going to finish this anytime soon. I hope to finish within the next month because I actually looked at my calendar today, and Fan Expo Toronto is about 30 days away. So I don't have that much time to finish this up. We're doing good for time. I think we're doing good for time. Now, while I've been working on all of those foam pieces, I've also been working on the helmet. Now, I don't make my helmets out of foam. I choose to 3D print them. Mainly because my 3D printer is capable of a level of precision that I am not capable of when using foam. And naturally, the helmet is the centerpiece of the armor. It's going to be the first thing you look at, so I want to make sure it's spot on. Of course, this raises the question, why not 3D print the entire suit? And the answer is, well, you can, and plenty of people have. It's certainly much easier to get a high level of accuracy with printing, but I still choose to make my armor out of foam, mainly because it offers a lot more flexibility. Not only in terms of how easily it can be modified when crafting, but also in terms of how comfortable it is to wear and the things you're able to do while wearing foam armor. There's nothing wrong with making a suit one way or the other. Everyone has their preferences, specialties, etc. But personally, I find the best way to make a suit is with a combination of methods. All that to say, that's why I make all of the armor pieces out of foam, but choose to 3D print the helmet. As you saw, I printed the helmet in 4 pieces, and I made sure to strategically orient them when printing to avoid having to remove too much support material. I glued the pieces together with instant bond glue, and then I start filling the seams with spot putty. I also printed the cat ears attachments separately with a small inset for a magnet. I then glued a magnet to the inside of the helmet as well. This allows me to remove the cat ears whenever I want.
Alrighty, I got the 3D printed helmet all glued together and a little bit of Bondo in the gaps. Now let's go ahead and sand it down.
I start sanding with an orbital sander with 80 grit sandpaper. Once that is done, I spray the helmet with filler primer to start filling in those print lines. I also put a little more spot putty over the larger imperfections. Then I sand the whole thing down by hand. I repeat filler primer, spot putty, sanding a few more times until the whole helmet is completely smooth. Now that the helmet is completely smooth, I give it a layer of regular primer. Now before I do the rest of the colors, or even the visor for that matter, I decided to work on some audio enhancements.
You see, when I have this helmet on, it can be hard for you to hear what I'm saying. It can also be hard for me to hear what other people are saying. And so to fix this, I added 2 circuits.
The first one is a voice amplifier, and the second one is a hearing aid system. Now the voice amp system was simple enough. I just went onto Amazon and bought one of these little voice amp boxes. I put the microphone in the helmet right next to my chin, and I'll put the speaker in the chest piece so I don't get any feedback. So that way, even when I have the helmet on, you're still able to hear my voice just a little better. Now the hearing aid system, or the hearing assist system, is all of this stuff that you see on the inside, and it's a little more complex. Now, if you're interested in doing the electronics exactly like I've done them, there is a tutorial on the 405th that goes through it step by step, because I'm not going to go into too much detail right now. But the long story short is, I bought this pair of shooting headphones that has an audio pass-through. I harvested the electronics from it and extended a few wires so it would all fit into the helmet quite nicely. I also added a new battery holder. Then, I attached all of the electronics back into the helmet. I put Velcro on the back of each earpiece so I could adjust it to fit my head. The microphones stick through 2 small holes on each side of the helmet to preserve the stereo audio. And with that, the electronics for the helmet are complete. As I said before, there's lots more information on the 405th on how to do this exact setup, and I have linked that tutorial in the video description. Now that the shell of the helmet is complete, as well as all of the electronics, the last thing I need to make is the visor. Now, I prefer to vacuum form my visor, as this allows the visor to be the exact right size for the helmet, and it allows me to get all of those 3-dimensional details that you see in the game. I do have a detailed video tutorial if you want to get all of the details. I've linked that in the video description. In this video, I'm just going to give you the general process. Now the first thing to do is to print a buck. This is a mold that the plastic will be formed to. Most 3D modelers are courteous and include an STL file for this along with the helmet file, so I'll just use that. I just print out the visor buck and apply the same processing technique that I used on the rest of the helmet. A little bit of Bondo, filler primer, and sanding. It'll get it nice and smooth so there's no layer lines on the visor. It's important to get the buck as smooth as possible because any imperfections on the buck will be transferred to the clear visor, which will reduce your visibility. Once the buck is ready, we can begin the vacuum forming process. I've got a box. This is a very simple plywood box, but there's a couple of special things about it. First of all, the top is made out of pegboard. All of these holes are very important. I'll tell you why in a second. And on the bottom is a much bigger hole. And of course I've got some legs. That's because I'm going to be plugging a vacuum into it. So if we look down here, basically how this box works is I have a shop vac here. Let's plug this in. And using this hole on the bottom of the box, I plug the shot back into this box. So when I turn on that vacuum, the air will be pulled out through this hole on the bottom and sucked down through all of these holes in the top. So then over here you see I have a couple other things. So here's the stack of plastic. Now this is the frame. Basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my plastic and put it in between these frames here. And then I'm gonna use these steel clamps to secure it together so that way that piece of plastic isn't going anywhere. So then I'm gonna take this piece of plastic in its frame and I'm gonna stick it in the oven. And then once the plastic starts to droop a little bit, I'll know it's ready to be formed. So I'll take it out of the oven, I'll turn on the vacuum, make sure my mold is on top of the box, and then I'll just slowly lower the plastic over top of the mold. Once the frame gets all the way down to the box, it'll create a seal, and then all of the air from the inside will be pulled down through these holes, and it'll form the plastic to the mold. I'd say that's close enough to 145. But at this stage, they're just clear plastic, so I have to dye them, and then I have to turn them into a one-way mirror, so that way I can see out, but nobody else will be able to see in. So in order to dye them, I've got some iDye poly. This is a good dye for plastics, I find. I haven't tried the RIT dye. I don't know how well it works, but I know this for sure works. I've got 2 packs. Usually I use 3, but this is all I had. I think this will be plenty. I might just have to leave the visors in the water for a little bit longer. So I'm gonna add the dye, and then I'm also gonna add the color intensifier, and then we'll get to some dyeing. So now what we have to do is make these into a one-way mirror, so that way the wearer can see out of them, but no one else will be able to see the eyes. So in order to do that, I'm going to use an airbrush and spray on some spray chrome here. This is the Alclad 2 lacquer. The color is airframe aluminum. We're just going to use the airbrush, spray it on there lightly, and then the visors will be all done. Fantastic! Now we have a completed visor, a constructed helmet with all of the electronics, we have all of the foam pieces constructed, and all of the straps done. We can finally start getting all of the suit ready for paint. And the first thing that needs to be done is all of the gaps on the foam armor need to be filled. Alrighty, so the very last thing I have to do to all of these foam pieces before I paint them is fill in all of these gaps. You can see that with my rough foam work, even when I sand down all of the seams, there's still a gap between some of them that has to be filled in. So we're gonna tackle that right now, and to do that, I'm gonna use some quick seal. I'm gonna start with this gap here, just to show you, but I'll start here. So all I do, I just fill it in with some caulking, and then I put a little bit of water on my finger, and run my finger along that seam, and that will smooth it out. And that's the trick there. So I just have to do that to every single one of the seams, and then it's good to paint. Now that the gaps on the foam are filled in, I could start painting. I start by sealing them in Plasti-Dip. Plasti-Dip does a great job sealing the foam and giving the paint something to stick to. If I had painted directly to the foam would absorb the paint instead of the paint sticking to the surface.
Sealing the foam also helps prevent water from being absorbed into the foam. Next, I do a layer of primer. While it's not entirely necessary to do a layer of primer because we already have the Plasti Dip, I do it anyways just for good measure. Sometimes, if your spray paint is not a paint-primer combo, or if you're using a lighter paint, the color doesn't always show up as well. Besides, a few cans of primer doesn't cost that much. For the color, I started with a base coat of satin white. Then later on, you'll see me mask off the areas to do the red, gray, and black parts. Originally, I was going to use the Plaid FX paint because it's supposed to be flexible and go right onto the foam without the need for Plasti Dip and primer, but I was having problems with brush strokes being visible and the paint being too translucent even after 4 coats, so that's why I went with plain old spray paint. Lastly, I'll do the weathering on the suit. While there's lots of different methods for weathering, I like to do just a black wash over the entire thing. That's 1 part paint, 1 part water, spread over the entire suit of armor, and then I dab the excess off with a rag to leave black paint behind in the crevices and grooves where dirt would naturally collect over time. Then I do a little bit of silver dry brushing on the edges to give the effect of chipped paint. Lastly, I give the suit a clear coat of satin clear paint. My voice is still a little bit dead, but I wanted to show you that I finished all of the weathering. So I've done the black wash and the silver bits on all of the pieces, and I also did the clear coat last night. Michael helped me paint all these up. So all of the foam pieces are pretty much done and all painted up. Today is Thursday, and the convention is tomorrow, so I've kind of been saving a lot of this to the last minute. So yeah, all I have to do is do the visor. We'll just get that all finished up, and then the suit will be completely ready.
And there you go! That's how I made a full set of Halo armor in just 4 months. I had so much fun making this project, and I learned quite a few things along the way. Before this video ends, I want to thank the 405th community for being the super friendly, helpful, and supportive community that they are. All of those other Halo cosplayers that you saw at the end of the video are part of the 405th. If you're interested in making a Halo suit for yourself, there's no better place to start than the 405th. There's loads of resources and templates for you to download, and there's always members willing to help you with your build. That's 405th.com/forums, not sponsored. Specifically, I want to thank Fangs for providing the Mark 7 foam unfolds, Mo Sislek for providing all of the Mark 7 STLs, and Spider Monkey for providing the Mark 7 ab wrap template. Thank you to Foamsmith for taking all of these awesome photos. Thank you to Chell Creates Media for taking these awesome photos, and thank you to all of these 405th members for coming to Fan Expo Toronto and the Cleveland Gaming Classic. A big thank you to Regiment staff for organizing booths at both of these events. All resources that I used are linked in the video description below. If you have any questions at all about this project, please leave a comment. I'd be happy to respond to anything I can. Lastly, and most importantly, thank you for watching.